Chapter next. Pippi gets unexpected company. One summer evening, Pippi, Tommy, and Annika sat on the steps of Pippi's porch, eating wild strawberries which they had picked that morning. It was a lovely evening, with the birds singing and the perfume of the flowers and the strawberries. Everything was peaceful. The children ate and hardly said a word. Tommy and Annika were thinking how lovely it was that it was summer and how nice that school wouldn't start for a long time. What Pippi thought about, no one knows. Pippi, now you have lived here in Villa Villacuela a whole year, said Annika suddenly, hugging Pippi's arm. Yes, time flies and one begins to grow old, said Pippi. This autumn I'll be 10. And then I guess I'll have seen my best days. Do you think you will live here always? Asked Tommy. I mean, until you're old enough to become a pirate? No one knows, said Pippi. I don't suppose my father will stay on that island forever. As soon as he gets a boat made, he'll surely come for me. Tommy and Annika sighed. Suddenly, Pippi sat upright on the steps. Look, here he comes now, she exclaimed, pointing toward the gate. She covered the garden walk in 3 leaps. Tommy and Annika followed her hesitantly, just in time to see her throw herself on the neck of a very fat gentleman with a short red mustache and blue sailor pants. Papa Ephraim, cried Pippi, waving her legs so eagerly as she hung around his neck that her big shoes fell off. Papa Ephraim, how you have grown! Ah, Pippalata, Delicatessa, Window Shade, Macalament, Ephraim's daughter, Longstocking, my beloved child, I was just going to say that you have grown. I knew that, said Pippi. That's why I said it first. Ha ha! My child, are you just as strong as you used to be? Stronger, said Pippi. Shall we arm wrestle? Go ahead, said Papa Ephraim. There was a table in the garden, and there Pippi and her father sat down to lock arms while Tommy and Annika looked on. There was only one person in the world who was as strong as Pippi, and that was her father. There they sat, bending with all their might, but neither succeeded in bending the other's arm. At last, Captain Longstocking's arm began to tremble a little, and Pippi said, when I'm 10, I'll bend your arm, Papa Ephraim. Papa Ephraim thought so too. Oh my goodness, said Pippi, I forgot all about introducing you. This is Tommy and Annika, and this is my father, the captain and his majesty, Ephraim Longstocking. Because you are a cannibal king, aren't you, Papa? That's right, said Captain Longstocking. I am king over the Kurt natives on an island known as the it's Curacurida Island. I floated ashore there after I had been blown into the water. You remember. Well, that's just what I knew all along. I never believed you were drowned. Drowned? I should say not. It's just as impossible for me to drown as for a camel to thread a needle. I float on my fat. Tommy and Annika looked at Captain Longstocking wonderingly. Why aren't you wearing Cannibal King clothes? Asked Tommy. Oh, I have them here in my bag, said Captain Longstocking. Oh, put them on, please put them on, cried Pippi. I want to see my father in royal robes. They all went into the kitchen. Captain Longstocking disappeared into Pippi's bedroom, and the children sat on the woodbox waiting. It's just like at the theater, said Annika excitedly. Then, pang! The door opened, and there stood the Cannibal King. He had a grass skirt around his middle, and on his head he wore a crown of gold. Around his neck hung many strands of big colored beads. In one hand he held a spear, and in the other a shield. Under the grass skirt, a couple of fat, hairy legs stuck out, with thick gold bracelets on the ankles. Captain Longstocking frowned threateningly. He says, Usa Kamar Musa filibuster. Oh, he speaks native language, said Tommy, delighted. What does that mean, Uncle Ephraim? It means tremble, my enemies. Listen, Papa Ephraim, said Pippi. Weren't the people surprised when you floated ashore on their island? Yes, terribly surprised, answered Captain Longstocking. First they wanted to eat me, but when I had torn down a palm tree with my bare hands, they changed their minds and made me king. After that, I ruled in the mornings and built my boat in the afternoons. It took a long time to finish it, as I had to do everything by myself. It was just a little sailboat, of course. When it was finished, I told the people I had to leave them for a little while, but that I would soon come back, and then I would have a princess with me, whose name was Pipilata. Then they beat on their shields and shouted, Usum plusser, Usum plusser. What does that mean? Asked Annika. It means bravo, bravo. Then I ruled hard for 2 weeks so that it would last during the whole time I was away. And then I set sail, and the people cried, Usum kura, which means come back soon, fat chief. Then I steered straight for South Arabia. And what do you think was the first thing I saw when I jumped aboard there? My old faithful schooner, the Hop Toad, and my faithful old Friedolf standing by the rail and waving with all his might. Friedolf, I said, now I will take command. Aye, aye, Captain, he said, and so I did. The whole old crew was there, and now the Hop Toad is down here in the harbor, so you could go and see all your old friends, Pippi. Pippi was so happy that she stood on her head on the kitchen table, kicking her legs. But Tommy and Annika couldn't help feeling a little sad. It was just as if someone were trying to take Pippi away from them, they thought. Now we'll celebrate, cried Pippi as she came down on her feet again. Now we'll celebrate so the whole house shakes. And then she dished up a big supper, and everyone sat down to the kitchen table to eat. Pippi gobbled up 3 hard-boiled eggs with the shells on. From time to time, she bit Papa's ear just because she was so happy to see him. Mr. Nilsson, who had been sleeping, came running out and rubbed his eyes in surprise when he saw Captain Longstocking. Well, I see you still have Mr. Nilsson, said Captain Longstocking. You bet. And I have another pet too, said Pippi. She went out and fetched the horse, who also got a hard-boiled egg to chew on. Captain Longstocking was very glad that his daughter had settled herself so comfortably in Villa Villacuela, and he was glad that she had had her suitcase full of gold pieces so that she had not been in need while he was away. When everyone had eaten, Captain Longstocking took some drums out of his bag. Captain Longstocking sat down on the floor and beat on the drums. It sounded beautiful, different from anything that Tommy and Annika had ever heard. Pippi took off her big shoes and danced in her stocking feet, a dance that was a little weird. Then King Ephraim danced a wild dance that he had learned on the island. He swung his spear and waved his shield wildly, and his naked feet stomped so hard that Pippi cried, "Look out that you don't break the kitchen floor!" "That doesn't matter," cried Captain Longstocking and whirled along. "For now you are going to be a cannibal princess, my darling daughter." Pippi jumped up and danced with her papa. That is quite a dance and quite an outfit for Papa Ephraim. You see Tommy and Annika and Mr. Nilsson. Looks like Papa Ephraim is, in fact, breaking the kitchen floor. Pippi and Papa Ephraim danced back and forth, facing each other, yelling and shouting, and from time to time leaping high in the air so that Tommy and Annika were dizzy just from watching them. Mr. Nilsson must have been dizzy too, for he sat and held his hands over his eyes the whole time. But by and by, the dance turned into a wrestling match between Pippi and her father. Captain Longstocking threw his daughter so that she landed on the hat shelf, but she didn't stay there long. With a wild cry, she leaped across the kitchen and landed right on Papa Ephraim, and the next second had tossed him so that he flew like a meteor headfirst into the woodbox. His fat legs stuck right up in the air. He couldn't get out by himself, for in the first place, he was too fat, and in the second place, he was laughing so hard. A rumbling like thunder came from the woodbox. Pippi took hold of his feet to pull him up, but then he laughed so he almost choked. He was so terribly ticklish. "Don't tickle me," he cried, laughing hysterically. "Throw me into the sea or throw me out the window. Do anything, but don't tickle the bottoms of my feet." He laughed so hard that Tommy and Annika were afraid the woodbox would burst. At last he managed to get out, and as soon as he was back on his feet, he lunged at Pippi and whoop, threw her across the kitchen. She landed on her face on the stove, which was black with soot. But she was up in an instant and threw herself at her father. She punched him so hard that the grass in his skirt came loose and flew all over the kitchen. The gold crown fell off and rolled under the table. At last, Pippi succeeded in getting her father down on the floor, and she sat on him and said, "Do you admit that I won?" "Yes, you won," said Captain Longstocking, and then they both laughed till they cried. Pippi bit her papa lightly on the nose, and he said, "I haven't had so much fun since you and I got mixed up in that sailors' fight in Singapore." He crawled under the table and picked up his crown. "Whew, the cannibal should see this," he said, "the royal crown lying under the kitchen table in Villa Villaquela." He put on the crown and combed out his grass skirt, which looked rather scanty. "You'll have to send that to Invisible Mending," said Pippi. "Yes, but it was worth it," answered Captain Longstocking. He sat down on the floor and wiped the perspiration from his forehead. "Well, Pippi, my child," he said, "do you ever lie nowadays?" "Yes, when I have time, but it isn't very often," said Pippi modestly. "How about you? You weren't so backward about lying either." "Well, I usually lie a little for the people on Saturday nights if they have behaved well during the week. We usually have a little lie and song evening with the accompaniment of music and firelit dances." "Is that so?" said Pippi. "No one here plays music for me. Here I go in my loneliness and puff myself so full of lies that it is a pleasure to hear me, but no one even plays a comb for me. The other night when I had gone to bed, I lied a long story about a calf who crocheted lace and climbed trees, and just think, I believed every word of it. That I call good lying, but nobody beat a drum for me. No, no." "Well, then I'll do it," said Captain Longstocking, and he beat a long riffle on the drum for his daughter. And Pippi sat on his knee and rubbed her sooty face against his cheek so that he was just as covered in soot as she was. Annika was thinking about something. She didn't know if it was quite proper to say it, but she just had to. It's not nice to lie," she said. "Mommy said that." "Oh, how silly you are, Annika," said Tommy. "Pippi doesn't really lie. She just lies for fun. She makes up things. Don't you understand?" Pippi looked thoughtfully at Tommy. "Sometimes you speak so wisely that I'm afraid you will become great." It was evening. Tommy and Annika had to go home. It had been a full day, and it had been such fun to see a real live cannibal king. And of course, it was nice for Pippi that her father had come home. But still, when Tommy and Annika had crept off to bed, they didn't lie there talking as they usually did. There was absolute silence in the nursery. Suddenly, a sigh was heard. It was Tommy. After a while, another sigh was heard. This time it was Annika. "What are you sighing about?" asked Tommy crossly. But he didn't get an answer, for Annika was crying with her head under the quilt.